Hello guys, in the first video for this lesson electrochemistry, that is part 1, I told you how cells are being classified into two types depending on the redox reactions, whether it is spontaneous or non-spontaneous. We have seen in detail the electrochemical cell, which is also called as galvanic or voltaic cell, in which the redox reaction is taking place spontaneously, and how chemical energy was converted into electrical energy in those cells. Today we are going to see the second type of cells in which the redox reactions are non-spontaneous. Since the reaction is non-spontaneous, electrical energy from a source is supplied to these cells and it carries a redox reaction. Because in nature these reactions are non-spontaneous. So we are going to see what happens in these type of cells which are called as electrolytic cells. All the reactions in the electrolytic cells basically involve electrolysis. So before moving into the electrolytic cell setup, let's define what is electrolysis. Electrolysis is the process of decomposition of an electrolyte when the electric current is passed through either its aqueous solution or molten state. In the previous video, we have seen how current is conducted in electrolytes and the different terms that we use to talk about these conduction. So here electrolysis, it is the process of decomposition of an electrolyte. The electrolyte can be any electrolyte, for example NaCl, copper sulfate. The process of decomposition of that electrolyte when you pass electric current through its aqueous solution or molten state. So the electrolyte should be in aqueous solution or in molten state, because in electrolytic solution, who is responsible for the conduction of current? Ions. So the movement of ions is very much needed for the conduction of current. So that is possible only in aqueous solution or in molten state of the electrolyte, because in solid state the ions stay intact. So when you take an electrolyte, it has two types of ions, cations and anions, positive ions and negative ions. When the current is passed, cations, which are positive ions, they move to the negative electrode, which is called as cathode. Same way, the negative ions, which are called as anions, they move to the positive electrode, which is the anode. Now let's see in detail how this process is happening. This is the setup of an electrolytic cell. It is made up of either glass or any other material which is a bad conductor of electricity. It is called as electrolytic tank. The electrolyte, either in aqueous solution or in molten state, is taken inside this tank. Here we are taking copper sulfate solution, aqueous solution inside this tank. Actually, current is to be carried by the movement of the ions, and the ions cannot move when the electrolyte is in solid state, as I told you already. So that's the reason we are taking the solution. Two metallic rods or plates called electrodes are immersed in the electrolyte and are connected to the terminals of a battery, like this. The electrode connected to the positive terminal is called as anode, and the electrode connected to the negative terminal is called as cathode. So this cell is called as electrolytic cell. Now, when the electric current is passed, the ions present in the electrolyte are attracted towards the oppositely charged electrodes. The positive ions move to the cathode, because cathode is connected to the negative terminal, so this electrode is negatively charged, so obviously positively charged ions will be attracted to the negative electrode. So the positively charged ions are called cations. Since they are attracted to this electrode is called as cathode. And the same way, the negative ions move towards the anode, so they are known as anions. After moving to the respective electrodes, the ions get rid of their charge and change into neutral species. So some substance is liberated or deposited at the electrodes. And since we are taking copper sulfate solution here, you have Cu2 plus ions and SO4 2 minus ions. So Cu2 plus ions will go to the cathode and SO4 2 minus ions will be attracted towards the anode. So the Cu2 plus ion, which is attracted to the cathode, will take 2 electrons and will be converted into Cu, which means Cu2 plus is reduced to Cu. So copper gets deposited around cathode. And we expect SO4 2- to undergo changes at the anode. But what happens at anode? The copper rod, which is dipped in the electrolytic solution, it is getting oxidized to Cu2 plus 2 electrons. So we get copper as a product and copper ion as a product. So the product which will be formed as a result of electrolysis depends upon a number of factors. Here we are taking the copper electrode, so the product is this. If you are taking some other inert electrode like platinum or palladium, then the product would be different. So now let's see what are the factors which affect the product of electrolysis. And once again, what is electrolysis? Electro means current, lysis means breaking. You are sending current and breaking this electrolyte into its individual ions. Actually, the dissociated ions, they move to the respective electrodes after the passage of current. So we call this process as electrolysis. As a result of this electrolysis, we are getting some products at the anode or the cathode, and that products are called as products of electrolysis. So in board exams, you have questions like predict the product of electrolysis of molten sodium chloride or predict the products of aqueous sodium chloride. So let's see how to find out this product of electrolysis. Before moving to that, you just note down one thing. Here in electrolytic cell, cathode is negatively charged and anode is positively charged. And as in an electrochemical cell, what is happening at cathode? Reduction is happening at cathode and oxidation is occurring at anode. But in an electrochemical cell, cathode is positively charged and anode is negatively charged. But in electrolytic cell, cathode is negatively charged and anode is positively charged. But always oxidation takes place at anode and reduction takes place at cathode. Now let's see the factors that affect the products of electrolysis. First one is nature of electrodes. There are two types of electrodes, attackable and non-attackable electrodes. So the first one, attackable electrodes, is the one which takes part in the reaction and it gets oxidized. For example, Ag in AgNO3 solution and copper in copper sulfate solution. Just now we have seen the electrolytic cell in which copper rod is dipped in copper sulfate solution. And the same way, if Ag electrode metal is dipped in AgNO3 solution, then we call that electrodes as attackable electrodes, and they do take part in the reaction and get oxidized. So when you're using attackable electrodes, we have to consider the oxidation reaction of these electrodes also to predict the product. The second type is non-attackable electrodes. These non-attackable electrodes are simply the carrier of electrons and they do not take part in the reaction. See, they do not take part in the reaction. They simply carry the electrons. When you use these electrodes, electrons are released at the anode and are accepted at the cathode. For example, platinum, palladium, rubidium, osmium, if you use these as electrodes, then they do not take part in the reaction. And the next factor which influences the products are reduction potential. You know, at cathode, reduction happens and at anode oxidation happens. If there is a competition between two species at anode and cathode, which one will undergo reduction depends upon the E0 value. The one with greater E0 value will undergo reduction at cathode, and at anode the one with lesser E0 value will undergo oxidation. So cations move to the cathode and get reduced. So which one will get reduced? The one with greater electrode reduction potential will get reduced at cathode, and you know, anions go to anode and they get oxidized. The one with lesser reduction potential will undergo oxidation at anode. And the last factor is overpotential. Sometimes we come across certain cases where a particular process is so slow at the applied voltage that it does not take place, but otherwise it is feasible. For example, if you take oxygen here, oxygen's reduction potential is 1.23 volt. But oxygen will not be liberated at this applied voltage. You need some extra voltage so that oxygen can be liberated. So that extra voltage or potential that we are giving is called as overpotential. Actually, overpotential is the potential that is needed, but we don't give that. The voltage that we supplied is not sufficient to liberate that particular gas. So we call that extra potential as overpotential. Now I will show you few examples, then you will understand how these factors affect the products of electrolysis. First, let's take the electrolysis of. In case of sodium chloride, we can take sodium chloride in two different forms. One is molten sodium chloride, the other one is aqueous sodium chloride. First, you should know the difference. When you say molten sodium chloride, you're just taking sodium chloride and melting it. That is called as molten sodium chloride. When you say aqueous sodium chloride, you're taking sodium chloride and dissolving it in water. So first case, you're taking molten NaCl. So NaCl is a dissociating to give you Na plus Cl minus ions. So now when you pass current, what will happen? Na plus will go to the cathode and Cl minus will go to the anode. So at anode, Cl minus will lose 2 electrons and will form chlorine gas. So which means Cl minus is undergoing oxidation at anode, and same way sodium ion will go to the cathode and it will take electrons to form sodium metal. You can write this reaction as Na plus electron to give you Na. Since we are talking about 2 electrons released here, because Cl cannot stay as one atom, so Cl plus Cl will give you Cl2. So in that process 2 electrons are involved, so we are taking that 2 electrons. So 2 Na plus 2 electrons gives you 2 Na, which means at cathode sodium ion is undergoing reduction. So the overall reaction can be written as 2 Na plus 2 Cl minus gives you 2 Na solid plus 2 chlorine gas. So remember, Na plus is getting reduced at cathode and deposited as sodium metal, and Cl minus is getting oxidized at anode and chlorine gas is liberated. So what are the products of electrolysis of molten sodium chloride? Chlorine gas is liberated at anode, sodium metal is deposited at cathode. Now let's take aqueous NaCl solution, which means you're taking NaCl, dissolving it in water, and you have Na plus ions and Cl minus ions. Along with Na plus and Cl minus ions, we have H plus and OH minus ions from water. See, NaCl dissociated to Na plus and Cl minus, and water dissociated into H plus and OH minus. Now, at cathode, both Na plus and H plus will be present. So there are two possible reactions. Na plus can take an electron and get reduced to Na, or H plus can take an electron and get reduced to H2. Here it is half H2. If you are taking 2 H plus, then you can write 1 H2. If you take 2 H plus, then you should write 2 electrons here. So now the question is whether Na plus will get reduced or H plus will get reduced at cathode. Both are having a competition. Now then look for electrode potential values. Now see, the E0 value for this reaction is minus 2.71 volt and for this is 0.0 volt. And just now we have seen the ion with greater reduction potential will be reduced at cathode. So this is greater than this. So who will get reduced at cathode? Hydrogen. So considering this and this reactions, where both the reaction have H plus, the overall reaction at cathode is written like this. H2O liquid plus electron gives half H2 plus OH minus. So this reaction happens at cathode. So at cathode, hydrogen gas is liberated, not sodium metal. Now coming to anode, there are two possibilities again. Cl minus can go to cathode or OH minus can also go to cathode. So Cl minus will lose one electron and form chlorine gas, half Cl2. If you are writing 2 Cl minus and 2 electrons, here you can write 1 Cl2. And the other possibility, the overall reaction is 2 H2O gives you O2 plus 4 H minus plus 4 electrons. Again, this is oxidation. So now there are two possibilities. Either chlorine gas will be liberated at anode or oxygen gas will be liberated at anode. Now look for the E0 value. 1.36 volt for chlorine and 1.23 volt for oxygen. And we know since oxidation is taking place at anode, the species or ion with lower E0 value will get oxidized. So when you look at this value, this has got a lower E0 value, so we expect this reaction to happen. But due to overpotential, which means this voltage is not enough for oxygen to be released, so which is preferred. This reaction is preferred. Only in the case of oxygen, we talk about overpotential here in these examples. So due to overpotential, chlorine gas will be liberated at anode. Now see, Cl minus aqueous gives half Cl2 gas plus electron. So this happens at anode. So NaCl dissociated in the presence of H2O into Na plus and Cl minus, and at cathode this reaction is happening. At anode chlorine gas is liberated. So the net reaction will be NaCl plus H2O will give you Na plus OH minus plus half H2 plus half Cl2. So H2 gas is evolved at cathode and chlorine gas is liberated at anode. These two will remain in solution as ions. So what are the product of electrolysis of molten NaCl? Chlorine gas is liberated at anode, sodium metal is deposited at cathode. In the case of aqueous NaCl solution, what are the products of electrolysis? H2 gas is evolved at cathode and Cl2 gas at anode. Here in the case of oxygen, due to overpotential, chlorine gas is liberated, not oxygen gas. Now let's see one more example with the difference in electrodes, whether we are taking attacking electrode or non-attacking electrode. We are taking aqueous copper sulfate solution. Electrolysis of aqueous copper sulfate solution. In the first case, we are using inert electrodes. Inert electrodes, example, platinum. So what will happen? Copper sulfate in aqueous solution will dissociate as Cu2 plus plus SO4 2 minus. And when you say aqueous, you have water also. So water dissociates to give you H plus and OH minus. At cathode, both Cu2 plus and H plus ions will migrate. But Cu2 plus ions with lower reduction potential is reduced in preference to H plus ions, which remains in the solution. So copper gets deposited at cathode. Just like in the case of NaCl, there is a competition between Cu2 plus and H plus, which will get reduced at cathode, but due to greater reduction potential of copper, which has a value of plus 0.34, whereas for H plus it is 0.0 volt. So Cu2 plus preferably gets reduced at the cathode and copper is deposited at cathode. Now at anode, there are again two possibilities. Both SO4 2 minus ions and OH minus ions migrate towards anode, but OH minus ions has a lesser reduction potential, so they get oxidized at anode. So at anode, what happens? OH minus will get oxidized to OH plus electron. So the overall reaction is this: 4OH, this OH, 4OH will give you 2H2O liquid plus O2 gas. So oxygen is liberated at anode and copper is deposited at cathode when you electrolyze an aqueous solution of copper sulfate using inert electrodes. Now coming to the second type, using attackable electrodes. For example, copper dipped in copper sulfate solution. At cathode, both Cu2 plus and H plus will migrate, and same thing what happened here will happen here also, because Cu2 plus has higher reduction potential, or you can say less discharge potential. Both represent the same. So preferably copper will undergo reduction at cathode and copper is deposited at cathode. But at anode, neither SO4 2 minus or OH minus. See, there are two possibilities, SO4 2 minus and OH minus. Neither of them will undergo any change. Instead, copper atoms from the anode, since we are taking attackable electrodes where copper is used, that copper atoms from the anode is oxidized to Cu2 plus. ions in preference to these two ions. Which two ions? OH minus and SO4 2 minus ions. In preference to that, copper from the anode will get oxidized. So the net result will be Cu plus ions are deposited on the cathode as copper, while an equal amount of copper from the anode goes into the solution. So it can be written as copper deposited at cathode and copper is dissolved at anode when you use attacking electrode like copper in copper sulfate solution. We have seen about both electrochemical cell and electrolytic cell. Now let's see what are the differences between these two cells. Difference between electrochemical and electrolytic cell. In electrochemical cell, electrical energy is released, whereas in electrolytic cell, electrical energy is taken up. So here the reaction is spontaneous, so chemical energy is converted into electrical energy. Here the redox reaction is non-spontaneous, so electrical energy is converted into chemical energy. So that is the second point. Redox reaction is spontaneous in the case of electrochemical cell. Here the redox reaction is non-spontaneous. In the case of electrochemical cell, two electrodes suspended in separate beakers. We have seen the arrangement of cell, voltaic cell. We had two beakers where we call them as two half cells. But in the case of electrolytic cell, the two electrodes are kept in the same beaker. And the next one, anode in electrochemical cell is negative pole and cathode is positive pole. And in the case of electrolytic cell, anode is positive electrode and cathode is negative electrode. And the last point, in the case of electrochemical cell, electrons move from anode to cathode in the external circuit. But in the case of electrolytic cell, electrons are supplied by an external source. They enter through cathode and released at anode. These are the differences between electrochemical and electrolytic cell. Just now we have seen products of electrolysis. We said some amount of substance is deposited at the anode or at the cathode. Now we are going to see the relationship between the quantity of charge passed through an electrolyte and the amount of substance deposited at the electrodes. And that relationship is given by a law called Faraday's law of electrolysis. It gives the relationship between the quantity of charge passed through an electrolyte and the amount of substance deposited at the electrodes. Because when you pass electric current, the ions migrate to the oppositely charged electrodes and they get oxidized at anode and reduced at cathode and deposited as neutral species at cathode and anode. So that quantity of charge which we pass has a relationship between the amount of substance deposited at the electrode. So the Faraday's first law, the mass of the substance deposited or liberated at any electrode is directly proportional to the quantity of charge passed. So that can be represented as W is proportional to Q, where W is the mass of the substance in grams and Q is the quantity of charge passed in coulombs. And that Q can be written as I into T, where I is the current in amperes and T is time in seconds. So for how much time you are passing, how much current, that product will give you the quantity of charge. So instead of Q you can write W is proportional to I into T. To take this proportionality, we are equating it and adding a proportionality constant where W is equal to Z into I into T, where this Z is called as electrochemical equivalent. See, this electrochemical equivalent will be equal to W when 1 ampere current is passed for 1 second. When I is equal to 1 ampere and T is equal to 1 second, then W will be equal to Z. So you can define electrochemical equivalent Z as the mass of the substance deposited by passing 1 coulomb of charge or by passing 1 ampere of current for 1 second through the electrolyte. So when you pass 1 ampere of current for 1 second through the electrolyte, the amount of substance deposited at the electrode is called as electrochemical equivalent. Now consider a general reaction, Mn plus N electron giving M solid, which means you are taking this ion is undergoing reduction to give you a neutral species. Here N is called as valency, or the number of moles of electrons take part in the reaction. Actually, we are not talking about 1 electron or 2 electrons. This is actually moles of electrons. Number of moles of electron take part in the reaction is N. Now we are going to calculate the charge on 1 mole of electron. You know the charge of 1 electron is equal to 1.602 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb, which you have learned in grade 11. If you have any doubts in this moles and atomic mass of the substance, you can watch the grade 11 video, some basic concepts of chemistry, part 6. So you will have an idea about all this thing. So the charge on 1 electron is equal to 1.602 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. Now I want to calculate the charge on 1 mole of electron. So 1 mole means how many electrons are there? Avogadro number of electrons, which means 6.022 into 10 to the power 23 electrons are there. If charge on 1 electron is this, then what will be the charge on this many electrons? This into this. So that gives you 96,472 coulomb. So the charge of 1 mole of electron is normally taken as 96,500. It is rounded off to 96,500 coulomb, and we call this as 1 Faraday. So 1 Faraday is equal to 96,500 coulomb, which is nothing but the charge on 1 mole of electron. Since we are talking about the relationship between quantity of charge passed and the amount of substance deposited, you have to understand this. That is, n into 96,500 coulomb of charge will deposit a gram of the element. Here we are taking A as the atomic mass. Here n is the number of electrons. For example, Na plus electron gives you Na solid. So here n is equal to 1 electron. So Na plus 1 electron gives you Na solid. So here what is the atomic mass of sodium? 23 gram. So to deposit 23 gram of sodium, you need 1 into 96,500 coulomb of charge. So not only sodium, you can generalize it for any element, taking A to be the atomic mass. So n into 96,500 coulomb of charge will deposit a gram of the element, where A is the atomic mass. Or you can say 1 coulomb of charge. See, here we are taking n into 96,500 coulomb of charge. Here we are taking just 1 coulomb. 1 coulomb of charge will deposit. You have to take this n and 96,500 to this side. A divided by n into 96,500 gram of the element. So from this we are deriving this. So 1 coulomb of charge will deposit A divided by n into 96,500 gram of the element. But just now we have seen in the definition of electrochemical equivalent, 1 coulomb of charge will deposit Z gram of the element. So you can equate Z gram to this. So Z gram is equal to A divided by n into 96,500 gram, where A is the atomic mass and n is the valency of the element. This A by n is called as equivalent mass of the element. So if they ask you to calculate the equivalent mass, what you are supposed to do? Atomic mass divided by n, which is the valency. To understand this, let's take an example. Look here, I just told you n into 96,500 coulomb of charge will deposit a gram of the element. When you say the atomic mass of the element, it can be represented as 1 mole also. Because 1 mole of any element will have a weight of its atomic mass. So look here, Na plus electron, 1 electron gives you Na solid. So to deposit 1 mole of sodium, how much amount of current is needed? Quantity of charge is needed? 1 into 96,500 coulomb. So 96,500 coulomb can deposit 1 mole of sodium, or what is the atomic mass of sodium? 23. So 23 gram of sodium will be deposited. Same way, look at this. Cu2 plus 2 electrons will give you Cu solid. Here n is equal to 2. So to deposit 1 mole of copper, or what is the atomic mass of copper? 63.5 gram. So to deposit 63.5 gram of copper, how much coulombs are required? 2 into 96,500 coulombs are required. Same way, Al3 plus 3 electrons will deposit Al, which means this Al3 plus is undergoing reduction and deposited as aluminium. So to deposit 1 mole of aluminium, or atomic mass of aluminium, which is 23 gram of aluminium, you require 3 into 96,500 coulombs of charge. So it can be put in this way: 96,500 coulomb deposits 23 gram Na sodium. Same way, 2 into 96,500 coulomb deposits 63.5 gram copper. Same way, 3 into 96,500 coulomb will deposit 27 gram aluminium. Let's see a few examples to understand this concept. Calculate the number of coulombs required to deposit 40.5 gram of aluminium. You know this equation. Al3 plus will take 3 electrons and deposit as Al, aluminium metal. So according to this, you need 3 into 96,500 coulombs, which can deposit 27 gram of aluminium, which is the atomic mass of aluminium. So now the question is, how much coulomb is required to deposit 40.5 gram? 3 into 96,500 can deposit 27 gram. So how much coulomb will deposit? 40.5 gram. So 3 into 96,500 into 40.5 divided by 26. So that is equal to 4.342 into 10 to the power 5 coulomb. So this much amount of charge is required to deposit 40.5 gram of aluminium. The next example, what mass of zinc can be produced by the electrolysis of zinc sulfate solution when a steady current of 0.015 ampere is passed for 15 minutes? And they have given you the atomic mass of zinc to be 65.4 atomic mass units, AMU. Now they are asking you what is the amount of zinc produced when 0.015 ampere current is passed for 15 minutes through zinc sulfate solution. So according to Faraday's first law, W is equal to Z into I into T. They are asking you W. Z, you know how to find out Z. Z is equal to atomic mass by N into 96,500 into I into T. I is given in the question 0.015. T is given in minutes, converted into seconds by multiplying by 60. Atomic mass is also given 65.4, and what is N? Zn2 plus. So N is equal to 2, the valency of zinc. So mass of zinc produced, W is equal to 65.4 gram divided by 2 into 96,500 coulomb into I, which is given in question. T is equal to 15 into 60. So you are getting 4.57 into 10 to the power minus 3 gram of zinc is deposited. Hope you understood Faraday's first law. Now we will end up this video with Faraday's second law of electrolysis. According to Faraday's second law of electrolysis, when the same quantity of charge is passed through the solutions of different electrolytes connected in series, the masses of the substance deposited at respective electrodes are directly proportional to their equivalent masses. So if you are taking two different electrolytes and they are connected in series, and you're sending the same quantity of charge through both the electrolytes, and now the mass of the substances deposited at two different electrodes are directly proportional to their equivalent masses. Just now I told you what is equivalent mass: atomic mass by valency. So we'll take an example of aqueous solutions of copper sulfate and silver nitrate. Both are connected in series. According to this law, mass of copper deposited divided by mass of silver deposited will be equal to equivalent mass of copper by equivalent mass of silver. If you take this as W1 and mass of Ag as W2 and equivalent mass of Cu as E1 and Ag as E2, according to Faraday's second law, W1 by W2 is equal to E1 by E2. Whereas what is this E1? Atomic mass by valency. In the case of copper, what is the atomic mass? 63.5. So 63.5 by 2 divided by 108 by 1. Because 108 is the atomic mass of silver, and in the case of silver, the electron involved is 1. Which means the valency of silver is 1. So this is the Faraday's second law of electrolysis. If you try to solve more problems related to these topics, then you can understand it better. Thank you.